Hello, this is Dr. Casper, and this is a summary of Locke. Now, when you look at Locke, we're talking about Western political thought. And so there are different types of political thinking around the world, but Western political thought is dominant in most countries and most spaces. Now, Western political thought, we're talking about the Enlightenment period, a time in Europe where there are vast changes that are happening, going all the way to Magna Carta, all the way through Locke. And so people are beginning to challenge and think about many things, including constitutional government, where a ruler's power are controlled within the guise of a constitution. We're talking about classical liberalism, right? In summary, right? When we look at a bell curve of distribution, right? The conservative is to maintain the status quo. The liberal is incremental change. The radical is major change. The reactionary is going back to a form that was before. So the people are moving really from what was the status quo, and many of them are pushing towards liberalism, towards change and radicalism. So there are many changes that are happening. And amongst the things that they're doing, they're challenging ideas of what is nature, what is man. Is man a thinking being? And how can a man operate outside the community and government to determine what is in their best interest? Can they do a cost-benefit analysis to get their utility maximization? So all these ideas are happening, right? In terms of what is virtue, what is reasoning. They're thinking about it politically, in philosophy, in music, in art, in faith or in religion. All these changes are happening in Europe as people begin to investigate and think about the ideas that were. And so this is what's happening in Europe. And this is the time period in which Locke writes. Now, in summary, Locke, there's a person who, for lack of a better word, annoys Locke. And so this man is called Filmer. Filmer creates a world, or argues that in his book, The Patriarcha, that God, right, creates Adam. And Adam is really the first king. And so Adam passes this kingship to his offspring. And in reality, when you look at the structure that is built, is the royalty, the nobility, the lords, the merchants, the slaves, and the serfs. There is a predetermined order of government, a predetermined order of society that we can get from such assertions. Really, it's the divine right of the king to rule as the sovereign. And the one who determined the king to be divine ruler is God. And so Filmer comes with this concept. We've seen this type of idea maybe in East Asia with different sects, or in East and West Asia actually, or even in the European invention of race with the Caucasian and the Mongoloid and the Negroid and this whole idea, right? And Locke doesn't agree with Filmer's interpretation, because in Christian Europe, Filmer argues this is the proper interpretation of Scripture. And Locke does not accept such an argument. As an empiricist, Locke will argue that by observation, experimentation, examination, that indeed Filmer has not only violated the interpretation of Scripture, but has created a situation that is unattainable, right? For a person with good reason to accept. And so this is one of the core things that drives Locke. Of course, before that, the king had tried to superimpose his brother, who's a Catholic, to the Anglican people. And so violations such as that, where the king can make a decision that is so unpopular, the question is the king's decisions divine? And therefore, if you refuse to follow the king's instructions, it is a sin. It is a violation of divine order and law, tantamount to being something that should send you to hell. Or is Filmer and the rest wrong? So Locke writes during this time period, and so we have different ways of thinking, different worldviews. There is the empiricist who argues that Locke is an empiricist, that we come to knowledge from experience, experiment, observation, that a man is born tabula rasa, without any, is born blank, and we gain to truth and knowledge by observation and learning. Or rationalism is another form of the time where knowledge can come intuitively through reason from the person. A person can be born with understanding and truth, and they can reason within themselves and come out with this truth. I think, therefore I am. And these different ideas play part, even if we think about today's politics, right? This is a table. If I sit on it, does it become a chair? Is it a chair now? Or is the foundational basis of identity, in fact, pre-ordered, that you cannot change the identity of a thing just because you change the function? And so there are different competing views, even if you take an idea such as transgender. What is transgender? Can somebody assign themselves intuitively a gender? Or is a gender actually something that has been inbuilt, like a table being a table, irrespective of whether I sit on it? And so all these ideas, these are ways of thinking that are coming into Europe and are challenging the status quo of how people reason, how people think, and how people process. Now, when you look at Locke, now in summary, get my... Locke starts us off also with God. He's writing in Christian England. So God is the creator also, in the same way with Filmer. The only difference is Locke would lead us in a different direction. So when it comes to Locke, he starts us off also with God. But he says that God creates man in the state of nature. And these people are in the state of nature, they're individuals, independent of each other. There is no subordinate. Therefore, there's no subject. There's no legitimate authority. Therefore, there's no government. And so what Locke does is, from the get-go, Locke has already started us in a situation where this does not exist. There's no pre-created order. God does not create the government, rather he creates the man. And that creates a situation where everybody is therefore equal. Okay? And these people have the ability to think. So while before Locke, the one who originated the idea of the state of nature, his name was Hobbes, he would argue that man cannot live here because life will be short, brutish and nasty, because the human condition and nature is one of competition and strife, that people will just kill each other and everything will be chaotic. So people would rather go and live in a government. And so most people then ask, is it better to have a government than no government at all? A lot of people in the room raise their hand. But Locke will argue the otherwise. He will say, it's easy to say that when you live in a good government, but would you like to go to live in a tyrannical dictatorship? Locke argues that the people here have a much better life than living under tyranny, that they have the ability to reason with each other, and therefore can develop moral relationships that allow them to have tolerance for each other. And so this is the state of nature. And so this is where Locke says things begin. And therefore, if you think about Thomas Jefferson, he would borrow this idea and say that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator certain inalienable rights, and here we say natural rights, within a given order that is under natural law. And that is where Locke starts and differs from the status quo of the time, right? And so he argues even dispute resolutions. If two people can't agree, they can bring a third party, and that third party can help them deal with the issues together. Okay? And so this is the state of nature, and Locke says that it's relatively peaceful rather than chaotic. Now, as we said, he endows man with certain inalienable rights. Locke argues we are able to live in the state of nature because there's such a thing as natural law. Natural law, I like to say, it's what helps run things and keep things in orderly fashion in the state of nature. Now, a couple of things are important. Natural law is knowable because, as an empiricist, he argues we have the ability to know. We can observe, we can experiment, and we can get knowledge. So we can know natural law. It's the foundational basis by which we can have order, and it puts obligation upon us, like we should protect people's property and people's lives, and we should do unto others as they want us to do, we do unto others as we'd like them to do unto us. These are the obligations that we get when we observe natural law. Now, the question is Locke really making this up as he goes? Is there such a thing as natural law? Because it has to still be present in existence because we're still in nature. And so I like to ask a common question that I normally ask students. I don't know, whenever you're young, maybe you stole something from your mother's purse, maybe a candy, maybe a coin. Have you ever stolen something tiny or done some type of mischievous behavior? Majority of humans, when they do mischievous behavior, even when they're very young, whether it's to steal something or to break something, they usually do not report themselves. They usually hide their crimes. Why? The argument is this is maybe a light explanation of natural law. That there is an understanding that within the human condition, you ought to protect you should not take somebody's property. Even if that property is a 1 cent, 25-cent candy. Okay? And so that's one example. The other thing I normally say is, then can we see it outside the human experience? Is there such a thing as natural law outside the human experience? Because all nature should also exhibit natural law. And normally I like to say that if I went and my 2 dogs went hunting and one day came home with a mouse in their mouths, all right? And I looked, would I think that's against natural law? No. It's definitely okay within the natural order of canines that they go hunting and they're able to get small game, if we say this. However, if I came home and my dog Bruno has my other dog Sally in its mouth and Bruno is eating Sally, at that point I'm very uncomfortable with Bruno. Why? Because I believe Bruno should have enough brain processing power in his creation to understand, to know the natural law of canines. That is a foundational basis, and it puts obligation on Bruno that he is not supposed to eat his own kind. And maybe those are explanations that can help us observe and actually claim there's such a thing as natural law. And because of this natural law, the very governments we have, their rules and the laws of government should be based on natural law. And anytime a government creates a law that is outside natural law or violates natural law, we can therefore be able to morally and justly be able to say that government is immoral, illegitimate, and their rules are unjust. It's what gives us the moral ability to say that slavery was wrong, because if you enslave somebody, you have taken the property of another. Who owns human beings? The creator of human beings, God. Therefore, if I take you as my property, I violate natural law. If I take away your life, I've taken away something that is owned by God, life. Therefore, I've taken away your right, and this is a violation of natural law. And therefore, we can judge the Nazis because they took life. So by understanding the natural law understandings, we can better understand rights, protections, when government is in violation, what rules and laws this government is based on. And so people are here, and this is relatively comfortable. So why leave the state of nature? A couple of reasons. One is justice, miscarriages of justice. If I'm 100% right and you think you're 100% right, under natural law, who wins? That's the problem. There's no judge. There's no independent government that can enforce law. There's no law enforcement. Therefore, there may be some miscarriages of justice. Another thing that we can think of is public good. things that we gain by living under a civic situation under government. So for example, public education, roads, bridges, we get that because we are unified, we have accepted to be under a government. So these people here might want higher levels of living. They want higher levels of justice. And then finally, there might be some security. They want higher levels of security because the security in the state of nature is based on you. And while most people have tolerance and there's relative peace, there can be a person who can choose to be a violator, right? And it might take time for the community, the different people within the state of nature individually to determine how they're going to deal with that, okay? And so you may want so you may need to move to a civic state where now the community can be able to organize themselves for the security. Now, how do you live the state of nature? You live the state of nature through a road called the social contract, where you accept, everybody consents, either explicitly because they participate in creating the social contract, or tacitly by virtue of inheriting the social contract. And I'll explain. Now, the social contract is entered, and these people transfer or mitigate their complete rights, because here everybody's a king in themselves. So they transfer some of their rights or mitigate their rights in order to come into a civic situation under government, because now the government can govern them. However, this government is not like Filmer's government. This government is created by God. Its obligations are very limited, maybe just to provide security at best. But for the most part, there's not much obligation on it. Here, this government was created with a purpose. And the purpose of this government was to provide justice, to provide public good, to provide security, to protect set natural rights, and to create their laws based on natural law. And therefore, this was very attractive in many places, especially in the United States, with the founding fathers like Jefferson, who found that whenever a government violates the purpose by which it was formed, it is therefore the moral right of the people to get rid of the government, go back to the state of nature, and create another government that can be able to give them the purpose of what they wanted. And so we see Locke making a major jump from government being created by God to God creating man and man creating the government. And therefore man has the moral right and the authority to be done with a government that's tyrannical. So in summary, that is a little bit of a summary of what Locke did and what Locke's political philosophy was. That's just a simple introduction and a summary.